Thanks everybody for tuning in to the Well Rounded Grappler. It's kind of been a little bit since I've had a guest on. The last one was Austin Hanson, which I've had on a couple times. But I've gone more into kind of these solo videos, talking a little bit about philosophy, technique, how to grow martial arts, judo, and then some technical videos showing some technique and breaking that down. But I'm never going to shy away from doing these interviews with different people. So the guest today, Michael Patrick, I met Michael up at the Dragon Society event that was up in the Raleigh Durham area, and it must have been something like 6 months ago maybe. And I'm always looking for these opportunities to network, and anytime I have an opportunity to teach, I try to take advantage of those because I really feel that my calling, I know that my calling is teaching, but anytime that I can go around and share my knowledge with a group of people that want to learn, it's awesome. So Michael, welcome. Introduce yourself to everybody.
Hey, thank you. Pleasure to be here. I'm Michael Patrick, one of the professors with Dragon Society International. And, sometimes I'm in front of the camera making videos and doing DVDs, books, you name it. Sometimes I'm behind the camera. So sometimes at the events, I'm the guy that's keeping everything running in the background. And I think when you were there, that's mostly what I was doing was taking care of the background stuff that day. So I'm comfortable on
Right.
either side of things. Somebody's got to keep
Yeah.
things moving.
Yeah, of course. No, and there's so much to this as well. Ever since we opening up a dojo in January of this year, and teaching at another facility and doing podcasts and filming instructionals and then things like that. There's a lot that goes, you know, to it, especially in the behind the scenes factor. So
Oh yeah.
how I got connected with Dragon Society was I literally just saw, a conference, right? The swarm that was going on up in Raleigh Durham.
Yeah.
And I honestly, just like, what I did with Rick, is the same thing that I've done with hundreds of other people. I literally just reached out and said, "Hey, Cole Stanley, this is my background. I love teaching. Is there any way that I can have a spot on the floor?" And the thing that's neat about this is that people always take a little bit of a chance, right, or a gamble by
Yeah.
offering me or anybody else an opportunity to come and teach. And me personally, right, a lot of experience. I was a school teacher. I teach I teach judo, between 5 and 9 times a week, with privates and everything. So, and I was a coach for a long time. So I feel that, probably my experience would set me apart and make me a little bit more qualified, or stand out, or to give somebody the opportunity to say, okay, cool, I'm going to give you a chance. But, so I went up there, knew nothing about Dragon Society, and, I figured it was, from what it sounded like, a little bit more karate based. But, to be honest, after going up there, talking with people, seeing that there was people from all sorts of different styles, right? It was a gathering of traditional martial arts, and a whole bunch of different people were able to, express, their opinion about martial art and show some of their technique. So, but to be honest, like, I'm not 100% sure of, the backstory about, Dragon Society, and kind of what it encompasses, and why it exists. So, you
Yeah.
want to go into, why Dragon Society was created, and then kind of what it represents, and what people can, look forward to if they decide to, investigate it or to come to an event.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, this is such a long story. How much time you got? We started
Uh,
back, I guess, in around the mid 80s.
wow.
And
Wow.
the way this began was Professor Moneymaker and Professor Muncie uh, were competing in tournaments and met up with some different folks who said, "Hey, you need to come see this guy, Seiyu Oyata, and see what he's doing." And so they all kind of packed up, went to a seminar, and were pretty blown away with what Seiyu Oyata was doing as this relatively small Okinawan, dropping people with taps and you know pressure point techniques and such like that. So what ended up happening is they were pretty convinced after a session with him that there was something here more than a standard karate do block punch kick that most of us had learned. And realistically, some of that stuff has limited application in the real world sometimes, even though a lot of people don't want to hear that.
Right.
Standard block punch kick is you know that's fine when you're young and strong and powerful, but then as you age, not so much power anymore and all that. So what Oyata was doing is what the Okinawans called old man's karate. And so literally designed for people that had aged enough that their kick and their punch didn't have the power it used to have. And so you attack the body at its weakest points. And so, the pressure point craze was going crazy around that time, uh, mostly thanks to Oyata and some others that followed after him. And so the question kind of became, if we're going to learn this art, how do we do it in such a way that we understand the techniques and why they work and how they work? And so we started studying science. I say we, I came along a little later on, but Professors Muncie and Moneymaker started studying the different systems of the body, anatomy, and kinesiology, and all these different things. And they developed a theory that if this was old Okinawan karate, that they didn't have a modern scientific understanding. They would have had Eastern traditional Chinese medicine as a basis. And so the research went down the road of acupuncture and acupressure and shiatsu, different things like that, to see could this be the basis of the techniques. And what they found was that where Oyata was striking and the techniques he was doing were overlaying perfectly with pressure points and acupuncture points. And so they continued their studies, and as they got to know Oyata better, and they began to ask him, "How does this work? What's the science behind it?" That really wasn't something that was well taught to him. I think if I remember my history correctly, Oyata's family had been teachers of samurai, and so they had techniques, but what they maybe didn't have as much of was the understanding of how it worked. They just knew it worked. And so we were in the early parts of DSI trying to figure out what makes this work. If we understand that, we can not only do the technique, we can apply it to other arts, and then we can also take it further and expand upon it. And so after a ton of research into different systems, a system began to evolve, and there was a need to bring people together to develop this further. And then DSI was formed, like I said, in mid 80s. I got involved somewhere in, I think, the early 90s. So um, I went to a seminar thinking I was going to train with someone else, and was surprised when the instructor was Rick Moneymaker, whom I'd never heard of. And so I was, it was kind of funny. I kind of felt like, wow, this isn't what I thought. And so I went in, was sitting there, and knew the school owner, Mr. Wheeler, really, really well. And while I'm sitting there, Professor Moneymaker, I think, realized that there were a number of skeptics in a room, me included. And so he decided to just break the ice and go ahead and get the skepticism out of the way. Kind of hard to teach people if they don't believe you.
Of
So
course.
he was looking around for a volunteer, and all of a sudden, my instructors in the Ishinru karate world volunteered me. And so I went up there not knowing what to expect. He took my wrist in an S lock, took one finger, touched it on my wrist, and I remember slamming into the floor so hard and feeling like, somebody just hammered me. And all he did was manipulate my wrist slightly. And I laid there for a while. I didn't even get up. I just laid there because I thought, okay, once he gets done talking, I'm going to slide out of here, go to the hospital, and get my wrist x-rayed because I was pretty sure he broke it. And he realized what I was thinking, kind of looked down at me and smiled. He said, your wrist is fine. And I just kind of shook
Mm-hmm.
my head, no, and he said, no, it's really fine. I promise you. And so as soon as he finished, I stood up, kind of took my wrist, and started moving it around and realized, hey, this still works perfectly fine. Like the pain was intense, but it was short, and no injuries, nothing like that. And at that point, I kind of became hooked. Like, okay, even though I was young guy at that time, I thought, man, this is something I could learn and do the rest of my life. And I'd been a tournament competitor, been nationally ranked and state ranked, and all of that. And that was the moment when I realized my tournament career might be coming to an end because I was going to put all my time into learning this. And so after I got involved, um, I started just trying to soak up everything they had researched, and some of the other certified instructors. We all kind of took areas that we were interested in, started researching, and that fanaticism has never slowed down. I'm still a researcher, still the ever living student. I'll never stop, and Lord willing, at least I'll always be learning, even if I'm bound in bed one day or in a wheelchair. I'm still going to be training. One way or the
Mm-hmm.
other, I'm going to research and learn how the body works, and it's amazing the different areas that we study and bring together. I mean, it's unreal. I had a black belt student that had to write a paper to get their, or a brown belt that was had to write a paper to get their black belt. And her mom was like, why don't you interview Mike? And so she's asking me, like, what did you have to learn to get your black belt? And I was like, man, we study books on kinesiology. We study books on optometry. We've studied things on forensics. And she's like looking at me like I'm nuts, right? And she's like, why would you study optometry? And I'm like, because the human eye detects movement. And if I can figure out where the blind spots are in the vision, then I can figure out avenues of attack. And if I understand how the eye perceives peripheral motion, if that's faster, slower, whatever, then perhaps I can manipulate someone's perception and stuff like that. And she was just sitting there like, I never would have thought of that. And I'm like, that's DSI, man. We study everything and never stop. So that's kind of a rough idea of it. There's of course a whole lot more detail, but that's kind of the gist of how DSI came about. And because of that, we apply our art to any and every style. Doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah, Rick gave me the same introduction that he gave you, man. And after I went to the Swarm, I was talking with my jiu-jitsu instructor Bill, and I said, you forget when you have individuals that have been doing like a karate or a Japanese jiu-jitsu or something along those lines that have been doing it for a long time, and just when they're blocking punches, I mean it's like a baseball bat hits your wrist,
Yeah.
or whenever Rick grabbed my wrist and was demonstrating that just the dexterity and the strength of his hand and stuff is incredible. So it's like, I mean, people can say what they want, but just a seasoned person in martial art, no matter what kind of martial art it is, they're going to gain this dexterity and strength in very odd positions and very unorthodox muscles that the normal person isn't going to use. And it was just cool to see. And I'm really happy that I went up there, and it
Oh
was
yeah.
it was eye opening, just to kind of see different things, because predominantly I've been involved in judo the longest, wrestling the second longest, and then Brazilian Jiu Jitsu as of the last 6 years, and now I've started to dip into some of these. I wouldn't be I wouldn't call them a mixed martial arts events like people would think of the UFC, but more a gathering place of traditional styles. So a mixed traditional styles martial arts events, like yours, the Swarm, which I plan on coming to more, obviously. And then I was just at I forget how you pronounce it, Shootaroo, that Troy Price puts on. I was at that international conference where I also ran into Wayne Adams while I was there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Troy puts on a great event. And the thing about what we do in DSI is it applies to any type of martial art. It doesn't matter. Um, we started with the traditional karate background, but several of the people within DSI, myself included, also apply this stuff out in the real world as well. I have a law enforcement background. A number of the guys in Dragon Society or DSI have security contracting backgrounds, things like that. We've worked with a number of people who apply this stuff on a regular basis, and man, if it works, it works. It doesn't matter. We're human beings. We have two arms, two legs. They move the same way. It doesn't matter if you're grappling, striking, whatever. We don't just do pressure points. A lot of groups out there will say, "Oh, Dragon Society, you guys are those pressure point people," and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
it's like a bicycle. That's one spoke on the wheel. It's not the whole wheel. And so all the things that we do that makes the pressure point techniques work better also make your grappling techniques work better. They make your
Mm-hmm.
submissions work better, your come along techniques, you name it. It just all works better because we understand how to get the most effectiveness out of the technique. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a concept we have called players to the game, which is a phrase that Professor Moneymaker coined. And it's just basically the idea that you have a team of players all working together, right? And
Mm-hmm.
these concepts, these principles work in tandem with one another to make techniques more effective. You don't have to change or learn a new technique. We just simply say, hey, what if you change this angle? What if you vibrate this? What if you transfer movement, kinetic energy through your body and allow that to transfer into the opponent? All of these things can then make the technique more effective. Um, and we have identified over 200 of those. And so, for the grappler, you want to make your Kimura, your Americana work better. What if you apply these principles? You want to make your strikes better. It doesn't matter if you're Muay Thai, Karate, Taekwondo, whatever. Angle and direction and attacking weak structures of the body are still going to work. And so it's designed in a way that it feels safe. So if the pressure point isn't responsive on an individual, either because their anatomical structure provides protection to the point, or the nerve is not as sensitive, or they have a high pain threshold, then it doesn't matter because we still know how to hit hard. We still know how to transfer power through our strikes. So the technique's still successful, even when it quote unquote fails. And so that's what I think's interesting is being able to walk into different styles, different schools, and not know their curriculum, but knowing this long in the martial arts, I've seen most techniques at least once, right? So, looking at it and saying, okay, like an engineer might look at something, how could we restructure this to make it work better? And that's really what we do.
Yeah, that's great. And the title of this podcast is The Well Rounded Grappler because, when you take just grappling specifically, right, that encompasses a lot of different things, right? You have one end, which, and these aren't really polar opposites, but this is just a couple different examples of grappling, right? Like you have folk style wrestling that you find in the school systems that kids start early and can wrestle all the way up through college. And it's an effective martial art, right? Wrestling is 100% a martial art. And then you have, another end of the spectrum to where you have, Japanese jiu-jitsu, which is also a grappling art, right? And after doing a little bit of research on this, and you probably know this, but I kind of really didn't think of it, but it made total sense once I heard it. So the reason why Japanese jiu-jitsu only has a limited amount of strikes and it's more joint manipulation and throws is because when the samurai were on the battlefield, they were in full armor. So in
Mm-hmm.
order to punch somebody, you had to find certain areas to punch because they had face shields, they had shoulder shields, they had chest shields, they had all this armor on, so striking wouldn't be as effective. But to grab them and throw them to the ground and break their arm is a lot more effective. I thought that was a really cool thing that I'm like, okay, that makes
Yeah.
100% sense now.
Yeah. And, you know, on top of that, the reason so many of the jujitsu arts have all the wrist locks and controls, have you come across the rationale for that yet?
Well, I would assume that it would have to be with taking weapons away from people would be my conclusion.
And a lot of it was weapon retention. So if the samurai were going to draw his sword and he reaches to his waist for the sword, sometimes the opponent would grab his wrist to try to prevent the draw. And so
Right.
the manipulations were then against the wrist because that's what was holding their wrist.
Mm.
And a lot of the locks were actually done with the grip of the sword rather than with the hand. So,
Hmm.
like a center lock,
Hmm.
you would rotate the kind of the hand guard across their wrist and apply pressure with it. And so it was kind of neat. That was the original intent. And then that evolved
Hmm.
over time into self defense if someone grabs you. And, realistically, a lot of men don't grab other men on the wrist. But what does happen is if I go to draw my handgun, someone absolutely could grab my wrist at that point, which is why I incorporated into defensive tactics that I teach. Um, but also for ladies, a lot of men will grab ladies to control them. So we still teach the joint locks, but we also do a lot of striking and grappling. And for the defensive tactics, we incorporate some Greco-Roman stuff and some BJJ and all that. So we try to be well-rounded ourselves. That we don't want to be locked into just being a karate group, right? So
Hmm.
all the different things, different groups we work with necessitates being skilled, armed, unarmed, you name it. So whatever the range of combat, that's an area that we need to learn and try to get better at. So,
That kind of reminds me, and I don't know why this kind of was buried so deep in my memory bank, but I went with my grandfather once to Sandusky, Ohio, and one of his friends, I believe, owned a dojo. But I mean, I don't even know. I was probably like 8 years old, so we're talking, you know, 25 years ago, whatever it was, and he, you know, was the instructor or the owner of a martial arts dojo, and maybe you remember these. He had this little stick basically that was about 6 inches long and it was on a keychain and he kept it
yeah,
on on his waist or whatever, and just I don't remember the conversation. Like I was probably like, "Hey, what is that?" Or maybe he had it and he's like, "Do you want to see what this is?" And he took that thing, and I was just a little kid, right? And he would bend my wrist with it and trap my hand and put pressure points and stuff. But do you know what I'm talking about? Do you know that little
Oh yeah,
stick that I'm talking about?
yeah, Kubotan. Yeah, the Kubotan was designed by Tak Kubota, but he based it off an old Japanese weapon called a Yorwara, and it was just like you said, it's like a 6 inch or so stick, and yeah, we've taught those for years, and encourage them for ladies a lot of times if you know they're not comfortable carrying a firearm, then we can at least teach them this. Or sometimes you're in a non-permissive environment, you can't have a firearm or a knife. A Kubotan is a great equalizer. They can be lethal as well
Yeah,
as being pain compliant oriented. So yeah,
yeah.
great tool.
That might have been the first time that I experienced the kind of those painful holds and kind of the use of pushing instruments into delicate areas. Right, you could think of it as
Yeah.
pressure points or whatever. But because I was on a podcast last night talking about this, um, so originally my introduction to martial arts as far as going into a club and practicing it was a YMCA. I believe it was a Taekwondo program, but again, this is 30 40 years ago, however long ago it was, and only did it for a short time, for whatever reason, and but I grew up watching martial arts movies, and we both know about the ninja craze that was real big in the early '80s, and all the martial arts stars that were on TV, or even predating that back into the '70s, but really in America especially, it seemed like it blew up a little bit more in the early '80s, I think, as far as Hollywood wise, and then it seemed like back in the day that there was a karate studio like in every town. It seemed like,
Oh yeah.
now it's more BJJ. But the thing is, and I did some research on this. Taekwondo and karate still have more members in it nationwide compared to Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, which was pretty surprising. I'm not sure
That
where
is
the numbers
surprising.
came from, but yeah, like, is that going to last? I'm not sure. I kind of wonder about Brazilian Jiu Jitsu if it's going to reach this climax, this bubble, to where the bubble can only get so big before it bursts. So
Mm.
what's going to happen in 10 years? Is there going to be something that replaces that? Are the more traditional martial arts going to come back? I'm just not sure. I obviously want judo to get a little bit bigger in this country because
Sure.
worldwide it's big, but in the United States, judo is pretty small.
Yeah, and that's sad. It's great martial art, and you know, I, just my 2 cents. I think over the next several years, people seem to be gravitating to things that are more practical, more realistic. So
Hmm.
I
Yep.
think for traditional martial arts to come back, people need to be able to interpret the movement in ways that are still applicable. And the problem that I see in the traditional arts is people are still doing the old block punch kick, as we call it, where there's no science, there's no anatomical targeting, there's nothing other than just hit as hard as you can and hope for the best. And
Right.
and then you have these ridiculous interpretations of I'm fighting three people at once and I'm blocking two simultaneously, and all that. And it's like, yeah, don't try that in the real world. So for martial arts to evolve and grow, it's got to stay practical. Fighting does evolve over time. I mean, we still punch, kick, choke, throw people, but now there's new threats, new weapons than when the traditional arts were developed. And so, if traditional karate or anything else wants to survive in the coming years, I think they've got to evolve. They've got to uh, make what the technique. I mean, the techniques are fine. They don't need to to change. I mean, you can take the movements from our forms, our kata, and give a large number of them updated applications that work very well. So the movement itself is not wrong. It's the interpretation of the movement that needs to change and grow.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so, man, that's what I think, at least, is I think BJJ came along, and what it showed was traditional karate people got in the ring with Gracie's and others, and suddenly encountered grappling and was like, oh crap, we haven't trained for this.
Hmm.
And,
Hmm.
they
Hmm.
were out of their element. Um, Now, in all fairness, any art, when you take it out of its element, its context, and put it in a different world, is not going to perform well. But, karate people learned, hey, maybe we should learn to grapple too. And so, and over time, as the karate people incorporated the grappling, of course, the grapplers learned, hey, we're going to have to learn to strike because these guys are hitting us now. So,
Hmm.
that's the beauty to the mixed martial arts concept, is being open minded and willing to learn. When I started karate back, I was 13 years old. And, obviously I'm a little older than 13 now, missing some hair and aged a few years since then. And we've dated ourselves, brother, talking about the 80s, you know that. So I'm older, so at least I can say that. But man, learned early on that, you first start out, you think your style is the best. You somehow magically pick the best martial arts in the world, and that's what you start in. No, that was what you ended up in, right? And, it's like I started in Ishinru not because I researched all the different martial arts and picked the best. No, that's what was close. There was a dojo, and that's where I ended up. And then, I met up with DSI, and I was like, hey, wait a minute, this Okinawan Kempo guy's teaching me things I never knew. Maybe my Ishinru isn't everything. And then, I met more DSI people from Taekwondo and Tang Sudo and Jiu-Jitsu and different things. And I was like, whoa, there's a whole world out there if you just open your mind up. And, I still teach Ishinru. I still teach Torte Jitsu. I still teach Jiu-Jitsu stuff. You name it. But now I'm at least open-minded to say, hey, my system is not the only system, and we don't even think that with DSI. We know there's still more that we need to incorporate and still need to learn. But man, it's a journey. You never arrive. You're always on the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I honestly think too that isolating yourself to one martial art and sticking within whatever the limitations or the structure of that martial art, right? You can only progress so much. You know, here's a couple of examples, right? Like, and this is just in grappling, right? Not even to explain how me with the judo background was, went to a club and did some light sparring with somebody with kickboxing, and just he absolutely crushed me. But not even that, not even that. So let's take judo for example. So I was in judo, and I progressed in judo for, we'll say, probably maybe about roughly 10 years or so. And during that time, I knew that I wanted to be a school teacher, and I know I wanted to coach. And so I said, oh, wrestling is similar to judo, so I'm going to get involved in wrestling. And when I first started, and I was in my early 20s, I mean, people couldn't throw me very easily or if at all, but man, if they shot a single or double leg, I couldn't defend it. So it's like, dang it, like I thought judo was awesome, and all of a sudden I can't defend my legs, right? So I had to learn to do that. So I had to adapt that into my style. Then I'm in judo for 12 years or 15 years, whatever it was, and I go to my first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class, and me as a brown belt in judo is getting tapped out by white belts in Jiu-Jitsu left and right. Like, it's just like, I can't believe how I'm missing some of this in my game. So just, now when I teach and now when I'm involved in the different arts, I sprinkle in a little judo if I'm doing wrestling. I sprinkle in a little jujitsu when I'm doing judo, and now I'm more well rounded. And when I teach, I hit on these different aspects, and the way that I teach judo is it seems like it's a little bit different than most because I'm not so much worried about what is the Olympic rule set for judo. It's like I still want my students to understand what leg attacks are. I want them to not go to the ground and turtle up and wait for the referee to say mate. I want them to understand what guard is. I want to understand how to get up off their feet or off the ground onto their feet, and just become well rounded. And again, that's just within grappling, right? Like when
Right.
you sprinkle in the striking arts, which I have literally almost no knowledge about whatsoever. I mean, it's a never ending journey. And there's always these aspects that you can lend to. And I think all of us, we might have a base and we reflect on our origins, right? Like I'm a judo player, but when I go to things like the DSI Swarm and I'm seeing these techniques, I said, how can I apply that to judo? How can I apply
No,
that to my Brazilian Jiu Jitsu? And I really think that is the key there is to be well rounded and to venture out of your own arts and don't just be stuck in one, right? And don't, like you were
right.
saying, don't think that like my art's God and I'm not going to learn anything from anybody else. Okay. Karate black belt, come try a beginner's judo course and you'll see that
Right.
it's a little bit different. Like, I'm not, like, I won't be able to, it was the same for me. Like, a judo black belt, go into a karate dojo and do some sparring. It's going to be night and day for both of us.
Right. And it's funny because in DSI, we have a saying that, if you have some secret technique you don't want anybody to know, don't show it to us because we're going to steal it. We're going to teach it. We're going to apply it,
Yep.
assuming it works, right? So we borrow from anything and everything. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter
Mm-hmm.
what the art is, the system. And there's such a fear in traditional martial arts of trying to keep it pure. Let's don't change the art. Keep it pure the way it was taught. But I've studied the history of these early founding fathers of martial arts. They were all studying everything they could. So they were out there, cross training in different arts and different instructors and then building their art as what they saw as the best of all of that. And I find it ironic that their students want to limit and say, I'm only going to do what my founder, my head, master taught and what he thought was best. And then I'm going to perpetuate it because it's not in the spirit of the founding of that art to just be so close minded when they were themselves studying everything they could. So for DSI, we're very open minded, very willing to admit that hey, we don't have it all figured out. We found some good stuff. It seems to work. We love it, but there's more to learn, man. It doesn't matter what it is, if it's a combative system or heck, even if it's just de-escalation skills, doesn't matter. I mean, there's soft skills along with the martial side of things that we can get better at and become more well-rounded martial artists in general. So I think that's a strength, not a weakness. But I'm sure I've got a number of detractors out there that will say, "Oh, Mike's changing Ishinru and he's changing Okinawan karate," and it's like not changing anything, just growing. And I think a lot of these masters who have passed on would have encouraged that. I think that the greatest honor to a founder of a system is to take their art, learn it, and make it better. I mean, that's what they were trying to do. So I don't see that as changing tradition as much as I see continuing a process they began. And to be quite honest, I think a lot of the old masters would love to see some of the things that we're doing today. I think they would be, you know, just astounded how far the martial arts have grown and how far they've come, new advances. I mean, we understand things like myofascia and neurology and things like that far better than they ever did.
Mm.
And so we can take their concepts and say, hey, here, we can use this kinesthetic movement to create internal tensions. We can manipulate the fascia and so on and make this technique hurt more. Why wouldn't they have loved that, if they had the science back then? So, you know, I don't care if people get upset and say I'm not a traditionalist in the strongest sense or whatever. They can keep doing their block punch kick. That's fine. But I do think the early masters would love what we're doing nowadays. I could be
It's
wrong, but that's just my thoughts.
it's not just happening in what people would consider traditional martial arts. It's happening in all the grappling arts as well. I just made a video the other day, and it was what's better, traditional judo or modern judo, and then I went into kind of the differences. And at the end of the video, I said that the best approach is to hold on to the traditional values but adapt the techniques for modern times, because I run into the same sort of thing, right? It's like I did this video. I had a student of mine who is a white belt, and he's a retired police officer. Well, not technically fully retired, but basically retired. And he's doing judo with me. And his daughter was doing an internship at Japan. And I said, you should stop by the Kodokan while you're there, right? You should go and check out the Kodokan. You don't have to train; just go and check out the museum, and it's basically the mecca for judo.
Oh, yeah.
So long story short, he goes there, and just by happenstance, in however many minutes, 15 minutes, they were having a beginner's judo class. And so he's like, you know what? I'm going to go there and I'm going to do that. And he did the judo class. It was great. It was a beginner's class, which I didn't even think they had at the Kodokan, which was kind of neat, actual beginner's class. But he brought me back a black belt from the Kodokan, right? That has the Kodokan symbol and the cool gold kanji. And it was like such an honor to get it. So I made a video of me tying the belt. Now, this belt is a little shorter than I normally wear. So if I were to do the traditional square knot ceremonial knot, I'd only have probably about this much sticking out.
Oh, I
And
got you.
yeah, so I'm like, I can't tie it like I normally do. So I'm going to do it different so that you can actually see the gold lettering. And man, I got all this hate on that video saying, are you even a black belt? Why are you tying your belt like that? There's only one way to tie a judo belt. And these are some seventh and eighth degree white and red and white stripe belts in judo that are telling me this. And it's just like, wow, man, like you guys are going to freak out that much over a video that was basically saying thank you to my student for giving me this belt, and they're going to clash on me with some of this stuff, and it's like you run into it in the wrestling community as well, right? The people that grew up wrestling in the 90s and 2000s that are now coaching the scrambling. I'm not sure how much you know or follow folk style wrestling or not, but there's a lot more groundwork now in modern wrestling than there used to be, right? It was take them down and pin them, but there's a whole different system now that's a lot more stopping you from getting taken down. And just because you go to the ground doesn't mean that the match is over. So there's all this scrambling that's been invented and adapted to modern wrestling. And these older coaches are like, that stuff doesn't work, we're not going to teach scrambling. And in the meantime, their wrestlers are getting pinned or not being able to score because they haven't adapted with the times.
Right. Yeah, man, it's ridiculous. The mentalities and I don't know. I don't understand it. It's just not the way I think. It's not the way I operate. But at the same time, I know that's a huge part of it. A lot of ego in the martial arts. which is also ironic given that we're supposed to be teaching humility and respect and honor and all these different, um, you know, approaches that really are a way of life, right? The original karate do, the do being a way of life, and the jitsu arts being the more combative. Um, it seems like we've lost that do side of becoming something honorable and being open minded and growing, while we've pursued trying to be more combative. And so I don't know. I don't understand the mentality, but I'm glad to see that it's not just us facing it, because we get it everywhere we go. I mean, we get a lot of hate with DSI because of the pressure point thing. And, some people over the years have maybe tainted that image with some of the ridiculousness that's taught out there, is just doesn't work. And so, yeah, man, it's ridiculous the amount of hate that martial artists have, instead of just saying, okay, there's probably a reason someone's doing this way, even if I don't understand
Mhm.
it, right?
Yeah.
And maybe that's a great way to ask a question, begin a conversation, and just go into it with, hey, what if the other person isn't an idiot?
Mhm.
What if they have rationale why they do that? Now, don't get me wrong. There's
Mhm.
plenty of idiots out there in the martial arts. We could both name quite a list, I'm sure, of people that just make martial arts look bad and
Yeah.
create the whole public perception that it's a joke, and that's too bad. That's we people like you and me have devoted our lives to martial arts training, and see it made fun of is painful, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but you have to
Absolutely.
realize, who cares what they think ultimately, you know they can stay in their basement doing the same old stuff they've always done, never growing, never evolving, and the rest of us are out here applying it in the real world and using it to do stuff. So it's okay.
Right. Yeah, and back to what I was saying earlier about how the way that I teach judo is a little bit of a culmination. I refer to it either as a hybrid system, which
Yep.
incorporates judo, wrestling, and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, or
Hmm.
you could think of it as old school judo because 50 years ago, judo had leg attacks, judo had more time on the ground to work on submissions, and it looked much different than it does today. And
Oh yeah.
I had an individual on my podcast, super cool. He's called the Judo Nomad. Have you heard of him by chance, Julian Brillard?
Yeah, yeah, I've heard of him.
You Yeah, yeah. So super cool. So his goal is to go to every country in the world and to teach judo, right? And I was lucky enough to have him on the podcast. He's from France.
That's
And I
awesome.
asked him about traditional judo that kind of just teaches the art and just focuses on like the old school techniques and things like that, and modern judo. And I said, you've been around the world and taught in hundreds of places, you know what what do you think? And he said 99% of judo clubs are teaching to the current rule set, right? The ones that are set by the Olympic Committee. And as soon as a rule changes in judo, then all the dojos in the world change, right? And I don't know how I feel about that because
Yeah.
I don't think what I'm doing is getting stuck on old traditional mentality and old traditional techniques, but I'm not letting go of what judo was, right? A physical
Right.
education curriculum that was created by Jigoro Kano that
Hmm.
taught people how to defend themselves and to have a good physical activity to keep themselves in shape, right?
Right.
And while there are judo rule sets out there which are cool, like the Kosen judo rule set and the freestyle judo rule set that still allow leg techniques and allow more time on the ground. It's interesting to me that not more places are kind of teaching what I'm doing and kind of just teaching to the modern rule set. So I don't know if you would consider that a modern approach or a traditional approach. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I think it's in the spirit of the founding of judo. I mean, as I understand it, a lot of those early techniques, like if you did a hip throw or something, you didn't set him down where he could do an easy break fall. You dropped him on top of his head, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the more, realistic application in the sport evolved from that. So, I think there's a lot of that in the martial arts, where it started as a real practical art and evolved to sport. And sport rules are always going to evolve and change over time. So, man, I think it's great that you're sticking with what you know works, and not so worried about, well, what's the present rule and all that of sport. In the DSI, our favorite thing are to do all the things the rules prohibit.
Mm.
A real fight, there's a reason there's a rule, because it's not safe. And
Right.
so our mentality is, it's exactly, what am I not allowed to do in competition? Okay, those are the things I want to be doing in real world,
Or it's
probably.
too effective.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the
Yeah.
full Nelson in wrestling, that is a very effective hold, right? And it's
Yeah.
illegal, right? Because of just how incredibly effective it can be and how difficult it is to get out of it, especially when you're on the ground. So,
Oh, for sure.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
But it's
found that out
interesting.
early on. When I first went to a Half Gracie seminar, being a karate guy, never been exposed to grappling arts. Found out real quickly some of those holds. I didn't want to get in there. Those I wasn't coming out. So I started doing what we do best in DSI. I cheated.
Yeah.
All these little things that we're not supposed to do. That's what I was looking for.
Mhm,
So
mhm,
yeah, it was
mhm.
funny. I was working with one of House brown belts, and somehow I ended up his training partner for the day. And they were showing me how to pass guard. The way the Gracies teach it in public seminars, which is not their best way of doing it. It's just
Mhm,
what they teach
mhm, mhm.
publicly. And I remember, man, I got into that guard, and he was crushing my ribs. I was a little scrawny dude, which is hard to believe now, but I
Yeah.
was a little guy, like 140 pounds, 6 foot tall back at that time. And
Oh wow.
man, he was squeezing my ribs so hard, I thought they were going to break. And
Mhm,
I was
mhm.
like, could not pass with their technique. And so, but I knew there were some points and nerves along the inner thigh that I could get to with my elbows. And so I hit that,
Yep.
legs popped open. I got out, I could breathe. I was like, shoo. And I was just cheating because I was losing, you know?
Mhm, mhm,
So
mhm.
it was kind of funny, because after I did that, I looked up and there was like a little tear coming out of his eyes. And he was like, man, that hurt. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh, sorry, dude. I said, I just, you were crushing me. I had to cheat. I couldn't do it your way. And he was like, man, I want to show this Half. And I'm like, I don't think Half's going to appreciate that. So,
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
stay within his art. I cheated because I didn't know what else to do. And I'm not as good at the grappling yet. So,
Mhm.
ever since then, man, that's what we do. I mean, everything's about getting a little cheat in. And, when I've played with some judo guys, when we tie up and we grab lapels, I mean, I'm digging knuckles in points. Anything give a slight advantage before he slams me on the floor. you
Mhm,
know.
mhm,
So
mhm,
any
mhm.
way I can cheat, I'm going to cheat, and in the spirit of fun, right? Not in
Yeah.
competition, but training. Uh, and it makes both sides better, right? If I'm quote unquote cheating and breaking the rule, but it works, then maybe that's something they can either incorporate, or they can learn to defend, and it's
Mhm,
just part of the
mhm.
growing process. So that's one way we play with other styles, is just saying, hey, what if we step outside the rule set and touch things, rub things, apply pressure here and there that maybe your guys you're normally training with aren't doing, and at
Right.
least gets them to open their eyes, see something else. And then along the way, they share with us, and we incorporate what they're doing that's really working. And hey, we both walk away better. And that should be the spirit of all training,
Yeah, I,
right?
I agree completely because earlier when I was talking about how I did judo, I went into wrestling, I couldn't stop a double leg takedown, I go in jiu-jitsu and was getting submitted left and right. I want to take my students personally and be able to drop them in either a wrestling, a jiu-jitsu, or a judo type situation with other people and they could at least have an idea of the basics of how to defend, each of these sort of styles, so because I think that's important. And they
Mhm.
transition and adapt to each other. But so to end it, we got about 5 minutes left. Tell us a little bit about upcoming events that the DSI um, has already planned, or maybe any big projects that you guys are currently working on or would like to, plug right now that people that are interested could check them out.
Yeah. So we're going to be in Burlington, North Carolina again. That will be first part of August. I think it's August 4th, if I'm getting my date right off the top of my head. That's going to be a seminar at Erica Smith's dojo. It's an Ishinru seminar, so we'll be doing Ishinru karate, applying the movements from the katas and trying to make them applicable uh, to the modern day. And then we've got some other seminars there later in the year covering more kata. We've tentatively looking at maybe doing a swarm in the fall. We typically do two per year, so one in the spring, one in the fall. We're trying to get something set up again in Pigeon Forge area for next year early. So that'll be kind of a swarm type of event where we bring different instructors. And we had Bob Steins with us last time. He does a lot of jiu-jitsu grappling stuff. We've had different people interested. Deborah Nichols does kickboxing, who is getting inducted into the Women's Hall of Fame, which is amazing. So shout out to her. And so we've always got seminars going on at our website, dragonsociety.com. And so if anybody's interested, we've got that. We've got Patreon where we do training. So we've got hundreds of videos up on Patreon where people can learn at home. We've got over 100 DVDs, well over a dozen books, you name it. So plenty of opportunities to either train in person, which is always best. But if that's not an option or they want to continue, we got all kinds of materials at home. So
Awesome. I'm definitely, again, like my goal is to, come back to, more events. Like I said, I went to Troy's event. I know that he is, at least I think he's somewhat associated with DSI. Is he associated with DSI? Okay.
oh, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, we've known
Yeah.
Troy for
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I went to his event, and again, similar. It was a culmination of different martial arts that were kind of teaching and learning from each other, and I want to, again, like, I like going to stuff and I like learning and I like trying to adapt it to what I'm doing and also going to subjects that I don't know a lot about, right? And just kind of get a little introduction to them. And it seems like, that all martial arts, they overlap each other to an extent, right? And it's like, like, and I kept hearing this whenever I was at both the Swarm and at Troy's event. I'm like, I don't really know much about the striking arts, and I got the response more than a couple times that they say, well, you're a judo black belt and you understand what martial arts is, so you do know some about this stuff. I'm like, okay, yeah, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
but like, the whole approach of, bringing people together from different arts, I definitely think is the way to go. And I definitely, incorporate that myself. I also, and I was talking with Rick about this, I have a 2-day camp that I'm going to put on in Charlotte called the Carolina Grapplers Camp, or Carolina Grapplers Convention. And I'm going to send Rick information on that, and I encourage, people
Cool.
from other arts to come, right? It's like, it's going to be an environment to where, if we are doing throws, I'm going to bring crash pads, and I'm going to encourage people, just like I do at my own club, that if you're newer to throws and you don't understand break falls, you don't have to get thrown with this. If you're just here to learn, just
Right.
tell us. If you just want to do the throwing and not take the falls, just tell us, right? And um, because
Sure.
one of my missions too is to take away some of the misconceptions that people have about judo, right? I mean, there's no way around it to say that, judo is hard. I mean, it absolutely is, but it doesn't have to be as beat you up and rough on your body as what people think, right? Like, I invested specifically on a 5 layer floor system, to make the falls easier. I bought a 12-inch crash pad that we use all the time, and we're not going hard all the time, right? And we don't do a lot of live.
Right.
We do a little bit, but because I want the 50-year-old that's just starting judo to want to continue it and make it a 10-year thing, right? To not just be a one and done. I have a student that or a person that I've trained with that I did jujitsu with, and I'm like, come to judo, come to judo, come to judo, and he's like, oh, I don't know, and one day he's like, all right, Cole, I'm gonna tell you the real reason why I don't want to come to judo, and I'm like, okay, yeah, 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 well, tell me, like, you could have told me at first, and he's like, okay, so a couple years ago. I went to a judo club, and that was my first and last experience with it. I went to the club. They asked if I had done any judo, and he said, no, I did a little bit of wrestling, and I've been in jujitsu for about a year. And they're like, okay. And from that point on, he was the throw dummy for the club, and everybody in the club wanted to go live with him and was going 100% on him. And he said, that was my experience with judo, and I'm never going to go back. And I'm like, I don't blame you, man. If it
Yeah.
was like that, the whole weed the weak out mentality, it's like that. That's that doesn't have to be like that, right? Like, people have to understand with things like judo, and I mean, Jigoro Kano, was practicing judo into his 60s before he died. I think he died in the
Right.
70s, but he was still demonstrating judo and still practicing judo every day, and that was in harder times with terrible mats, and just, I mean, sometimes doing it on the floor, and I mean, he's still doing it, but it definitely has to, you know, people have to have a better understanding, and it's not just judo too. Um, when I had a uh, Ken Nazamitz on the podcast, he was talking about how he was in karate in, I believe, the 80s. They had this this sandbag, and they called it Sandpaper Sally, and it was called that because people would go over there and just kick it until their shins bled. And he said even back then, you had individuals that would come in, they saw that, and they're like, heck no, and then they would leave, right? And then that dojo eventually disappeared because people didn't want to go to it, right? It's like you have this
Yeah.
weed out the weak mentality that might have been okay when you're relating martial arts to warfare, but when you're talking about it as a lifestyle of teaching people better morals and keeping people in it for life, it needs to adapt and change a little bit with applying to older people as well. So you want to end with that? Just your opinion on a couple of the last things that I've said.
No, it was same for me. I mean, the original dojo I started in, um, the instructor was, I mean, I thought the world of him, but he liked his class small. And I remember one time we got up to 20 students. I was so excited that the dojo was growing and it's going somewhere. And he comes over to me and he said, way too many people. We need to get rid of half of them.
Mm,
And I just couldn't understand that. So he drilled the class, hardest workout we could do. People were, about to pass out from the heat and sweat, and just, push-ups upon push-ups and hitting bags to knuckles bled and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I had the same experience. Next class we had like 10 or 12 people. He was like much better.
Yeah.
And didn't want to train the ladies, wouldn't work with them, didn't think they were worth his time.
No kids.
So I ended up becoming, yeah, no
Mm.
kids at all. And so I became the instructor that when a younger student or female came in, I was always like, hey, why don't you let me work with them? And as a result, I trained one lady, Mary. She became a Tennessee state champion, was nationally ranked. And I mean, she used to kick my butt in sparring. So, uh, and it's funny how that began to change his attitude, because he saw that, hey, she was determined, she stuck with it, and she became great. And after that, he started being like, hey, that's our student. And I'm like, wait a minute, what do you mean our student? That's
Yeah,
my
yeah, of
student.
course.
You didn't want to work with her. And so I think a lot of those attitudes changed, because the early people, many of them came from a military background, and they wanted trained soldiers. Like, they didn't want to train the average
Sure.
person, and they didn't think average people could handle it. But once we showed some of us had some grit and desire to learn, I think it changed a lot of those attitudes over time, although there's still plenty of
Yeah.
those out there.
Well, man,
Too
Michael, it's
bad,
been
man.
awesome. I really appreciate having you on, and it's one of the reasons
Here.
that I like doing these podcasts is because I get experienced, lifelong people on this that have deep understanding, deep historical sense, and just knows that martial arts is much more than just kicking and punching, throwing and submitting. So, thank you so much for your time. Anything before we leave for today?
Thank you. No, man, it's been great talking to you. Appreciate the chance to come on and talk martial arts with somebody else who's probably as big a fanatic
Yep.
as I am about it. So that's been great, and look forward to working with you more in the
Yeah, yeah.
future.
I'll.
Maybe we can get some more
Yeah,
hands-on
yeah.
next
Of
time.
course.
I won't be so busy
All
behind the
good.
camera.
No, I'm looking forward to another event, and yeah, looking forward to it. And anybody listening, right, that is involved in a singular martial art, don't be afraid to step out. Don't be the person that says that that you can't learn, or that this is unapplicable, or that it's not going to help me in my martial art. Right? You got to be more open minded. So thank you so much, Michael. We'll see you down the road, and I'll let you know. This will be turned around pretty quick, and I'll send you the links once they're done, probably within a couple days.
No, no
All
worries,
right.
buddy. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a good night, man, and good luck with everything with
You
your
too.
mom. Okay.
Hey, I appreciate it, buddy. Hopefully we get some good
For
answers
sure.
today. I hope.
Oh yeah. All right. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.
All right. See you.